What is up, everyone? Let's talk about new Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator Kristen Parker addressing the media for the first time on Wednesday. I'm going to give you my initial impressions from Parker's first press conference, and I'm not going to be shy about my reaction. I'm not going to be shy at all. I'm going to tell you, holy smokes, I'm impressed with this guy. Number one, he sounds like a future head coach. If you listen to him talk, he sounds like someone who is extremely confident, which stands out specifically because he's 34 years old. But also, he sounds like someone who knows exactly what he wants on his unit going into the 2026 NFL season. Christian Parker was in command of that press conference. There was a brief moment, and I know this is just coach speak a lot of the time, but there's a moment in which they ask him, like, hey, you're 34 years old. What makes you think that you're ready to be a coordinator at the NFL level? And he doesn't even bother to answer the question. He just goes, oh, I'm ready. Like, not one single bit of hesitation in his voice. But again, I know that's just coach speak, and we can just talk about it for 2 hours here in the live stream if we want to, but it means nothing unless he's coming in with the scheme to back it up. And the thing about Christian Parker is he's been around Big Fangio, he's been around Vance Joseph, he's been around a lot of people that know their stuff. So I absolutely expect him to have the X's and O's to back up his strong remarks from the Wednesday press conference. But here are 3 things that stood out from Kristen Parker's first time talking as a Cowboys defensive coordinator. Number one, he was not shy about laying out what he wants to be, what he wants the identity of the Cowboys defense to be. Some coaches will say they want to be physical. Some coaches will talk about fundamentals. Some others will go with aggressive. When Christian Parker was asked about what he envisions for the Cowboys defense, there was one word, one key word, and that's being multiple. And you know what? I'll give you the exact quote from Christian Parker here so we're all on the same page. But Christian Parker said, we are going to be multiple. Whenever you form a defensive structure, it's about the players that you have. Core principles, we will be a 3-4 by nature. This shouldn't be a surprise for Cowboys fans if you've learned a little bit about what Christian Parker has done in the past. But he mentioned we'll be a 3-4 defense by nature, so 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers. That includes your outside linebackers who are pretty much your edge rushers. But 4-3 spacing will be appropriate. 4-2-5 in nickel, so that's 5 defensive backs, different front structures, coverages behind it. But I will say being multiple is probably the most important thing about it. So there you go. That, number one, should be refreshing for Cowboys fans. And I'll tell you why. Matt Eberflus' defense was static. Matt Eberflus' defense was all about the fundamentals. We'll line up, we'll play solid football, we won't make mistakes. The problem is the Cowboys didn't really have the talent for that kind of scheme to stand out. If Matt Eberflus had a bunch of Pro Bowlers at every level of the defense, it would have looked very different. The problem was that Eberflus didn't have a changeup for the reality that he found himself in, which was you don't have the players, right? So that's number one takeaway from the Christian Parker press conference is the Cowboys are planning to be multiple. What does that mean? Well, it means your Cowboys defense will look different, not only game to game, but from down to down, right? They will have a base defense because everyone has a base defense, but the coverages that you see the Cowboys play will be very varied. The fronts will be very varied, and that means you're not going to see cover 3 all the time, like maybe you did with Eberflus. You're not going to see cover 1 all the time, like maybe you did with Dan Quinn. This is going to be a little bit of everything for the Cowboys, and up front, it's also going to be changing consistently. Now, I will say the 3-4 versus 4-3 argument, it's kind of outdated, right? It matters, but it doesn't matter as much as I think a lot of football fans still think it does. And I'm saying that because it really the lines are a little bit blurry nowadays with what a 3-4 and a 4-3 are, because what you essentially have is you will always have two interior defensive linemen for the most part. There will be exceptions, and you should know that as Cowboys fans, because Dallas was playing with three defensive tackles for a good chunk of last season. But you will have two edge rushers. Now, whether you call those defensive ends in a 4-3 or outside linebackers in a 3-4 matters very little. But here's where it does get interesting, in my opinion. I think if Christian Parker is coming into this team and being like, we'll be a 3-4 by nature, so we'll have outside linebackers, I think those outside linebackers will be asked to do a little bit more than just play de facto defensive end. So I wouldn't be surprised if you suddenly see outside linebackers that are being asked to drop back a little bit more often, right? Or that are being asked to play different kinds of roles other than just being that guy on the edge, that guy on that end man at the line of scrimmage. So more versatility maybe at edge rusher is what I would expect. On the other hand, and this drives us to point number two, the number two takeaway from Christian Parker's big press conference. I would expect the Cowboys to be very open to trying to get Kenny Clark, Ozo Odighizuwa, and Quinnen Williams on the field at the same time. He was asked about this specifically, and his answer was, well, you have different ways of doing that. 5 down front is one of them. That's basically what we saw from the Cowboys in 2025 when they couldn't find an answer to rush the passer, and Matt Eberflus was like, you know what, screw it. I'll just do 3 defensive tackles at a time as much as I can. So you can do that on 5-man fronts, but Parker also said there are some different ways or 4-down structures that you can do that as well. There are 6-man presentations where you can do that as well. Here's the key part though. The defensive line and winning the game up front is significant. So how we can change the math and get the best players on the field will always be a part of what we do. Now, maybe we got to dive a little bit deeper into the Philadelphia Eagles film to see if we can find any examples of it. But I think about the Carolina Panthers last year. The Carolina Panthers were not the best team in the playoffs, of course, but they did some creative stuff with their defensive line. And when Christian Parker talks about having 4-man fronts and having 3 defensive tackles in there, I think about the Panthers because at times they would play a big defensive tackle on the edge. And they would do so to contain the run a bunch of the time. And I wonder if Christian Parker will get a little bit funky as a first-time defensive coordinator, where he will have Kenny Clark on the edge or something. He's talking about being multiple and finding different ways to get 3 defensive tackles in there other than just your regular 4-man fronts or 5-man fronts. And I think he could get creative in that aspect. And that's something that I'm looking forward to for sure. Now, before we get to number 3, and I don't want to sound clickbaity or anything, but man, I am excited about getting to number 3. Let me just say hi very quickly in the comments over here on TikTok. We've got Cyber Bob who says, I remember that we didn't take TJ Watt because they said he didn't fit the system. That was outdated in 2017. Imagine how outdated it is now in 2026, which really speaks to the point that we were talking about earlier with just the 3-4 and the 4-3 differences being so outdated. And man, Cyberbob, I know Cowboys fans will always hate Dallas for not picking TJ Watt back in 2017. But you're right. It's ridiculous to have said that, TJ Watt didn't fit your scheme. It's absolutely crazy to say. Christian Parker actually talked a little bit about this on the press conference, not about TJ Watt, but he said, good players fit any system. And I really liked when he said that. I think that was very telling from Christian Parker, right? So he's not going to go out there looking for a linebacker that does A, B, and C. He's going to look for a good player that can fit whatever he asks them to do. Because again, what does he want to be? Multiple. So I wouldn't be surprised if Christian Parker is out there looking for athletes that can play and then just building the scheme around it, which is also what he said. And that's easier said than done, of course, but I don't think Christian Parker will be looking for that archetype that really fits the mold of his ideal linebacker or his ideal cornerback. He's more than open to just adapting to his players, which is obviously what you should want your defensive coordinator to do. Shout out to the TC915 or over on YouTube saying, "What's up, Mo? Thank you for joining the show." And Alex Flores over on Twitter, he says, "Did he say something about being physical?" I'm not sure that he mentioned the word physical specifically. He just mostly focused on having players that fit in his system. But I can tell you 100% Christian Parker will want the Cowboys defense to be physical. I think there's no defensive coordinator out there that doesn't want that. Maybe it wasn't his point of emphasis on today's press conference. Maybe today he focused a little bit more on the multiplicity and the versatility of his defense rather than physicality. But that's all right. I wouldn't take that as a negative thing. Now, number 3, and I really like this. When I tell you that press conference began, and I was impressed right away with how Christian Parker carried himself, you're talking about someone who is in command of the locker room, but you're also talking about someone who is probably a good teacher. Now, Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer said early in the process, he wants a good teacher, a defensive coordinator. That's what he said immediately. Let me tell you this. When Christian Parker started talking about teaching, I got a little bit excited. And I know it's just talking right now, and I know some people will be like, I don't care. Let's see how they play defense. I think this kind of thing matters. Here is what Christian Parker had to say. He says, you have to know the student first and foremost. You have to know who you're talking to. What might hit one player's brain is going to hit different on another. Being thorough and being detailed, being very clear and concise in terms of your messaging. When to correct, when not to correct. I love this. Get ready for this. Sometimes players got to touch the stove. You just want to do it in a controlled environment. Okay? Then he added the diversity of teaching, whether it's on the field, in the meeting room, Kahoot quizzes, physical quizzes, showing them video examples, having them teach in front of the room. There are so many different ways that you can kind of get in the weeds of teaching. Now, several takeaways from that quote. Number 1, him going out there and being like, hey, you got to touch the stove sometimes. That speaks to a coach that, hey, I'll let you get burned in practice. I'll let you learn the hard way. I will make you see what your mistake was before I tell you. So I don't want to necessarily tell you what you're doing wrong. I'm going to show you, and you're going to see it in practice. Hopefully you won't see it on game day, but hopefully that experience of you saw why you shouldn't have taken your eyes off of the number 2 receiver instead of going to the number 1 immediately. You know, that kind of thing. You're going to get burned in practice for that, and then I'm going to correct you. I think that is huge. And I think a lot of people talk about this when they talk about teaching or you know what, when they talk about parenting. I think it's also something that comes up pretty often. I'm not a parent, so I'm not saying that I would know, but I'm talking about hearing other parents or teachers being like, yeah, you got to let them make mistakes, right? This is what Christian Parker is telling you. He's talking to you about Kahoot quizzes. Now, I don't know who watching the live stream today did Kahoot quizzes when he or she was at school, but I can tell you, I had my fair share of Kahoot quizzes in college and in high school. And when I tell you I got excited at those, now, I wasn't a nerd. I mean, I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd in a different way, but I wasn't a school nerd getting A's every single semester or anything like that. But when the teacher fired up the Kahoot, it was game on for me, man, because I wanted to win. I wanted to compete in that brief space, and I wanted to get the right answers so I could show up in the leader room. And I can tell you, my schoolmates would also get excited. I think everyone here who has been a part of a class where they ask them to pull out the Kahoot, dude, people love that stuff. So when Christian Parker takes over that meeting room and he's talking to 20-something-year-old players, dude, I think that's the kind of stuff that works. I think for a defensive coordinator in the NFL to be willing to do Kahoot quizzes, I think it's telling, man. I think it's someone who will understand the players. I got excited by that personally. So I think Brian Schottenheimer got what he wanted in that sense by hiring Christian Parker. The TC915 says he said his core philosophy was to stop the run and get pressure. And if I remember correctly, the exact words that Christian Parker used was stop the run and affect the quarterback. And something that I really liked was you affect the quarterback by stopping the run. Because basically what he was saying with that was you pretty much keep them away from first down and second down play calling. And you force them into third long play calling. And good luck with that, right? So yeah, Christian Parker did talk about that, which is also very relevant in my opinion, because you hear a lot about Christian Parker's background and him coaching a lot of defensive backs and being the pass game coordinator for the Eagles. And maybe you go, well, this guy is going to focus on the secondary. But then he comes in and he tells you, you know what? My focus is stopping the run. That sounds good, man. That sounds good. That sounds like a coach with a very complete grasp of what playing winning defense looks like, right, at the NFL level. So I'm excited about that too. Dan says we're going to need plenty of linebackers. Dan, I 100% agree with you. And I wouldn't stop there. You're going to need plenty of linebackers. You're going to need plenty of cornerbacks. You're going to need plenty of safeties, even edge rushers. I think the one thing you don't need multiple players of is defensive tackles, because you've got yourself 3 very good defensive tackles. But I did walk away from this press conference thinking, I'm not sure that this team is in a rush to get rid of Kenny Clark or to get rid of Ozo Digisuwa. Every passing week, I kind of get the feeling this team is going to go to 2026 with the 3 defensive tackles that they've got. Now, do they try to negotiate a pay cut with Kenny Clark? I think it's possible. More than a pay cut, I wonder if it's going to be like a reworked deal, like something that guarantees Kenny Clark's future for the next 2 years instead of having $21 million in non-guaranteed salary in 2026, which will become guaranteed in, I think it's March 13th. So I would expect the Cowboys to try to move quickly in that front. Alex says, didn't they ask him about potential signings? They did, but naturally he didn't offer anything, and that's just Christian Parker being smart. It's February 18th. He's not about to tell you his free agent targets, right? So makes sense that he didn't get into it. He was asked about the Eagles and maybe getting players from there, and he said, we'll see, right? Kind of laughed it off. I think we all know that Nakobe Dean could be a target for this team. Reed Blankenship at safety could also make sense. But yeah, he's not going to tell you that. He's not going to tell you that right now. He was asked, but he didn't offer any insight there, and I think that just makes sense. TC915 says, I like all the answers that he gave today. It's refreshing to know that the Cowboys are moving different this year, from the coaching hires to the fact that Jerry wasn't in front of the cameras today. Listen, TC915, I think that's a great point. I'm not sure. Did they have Jerry Jones up there when they hired Matt Eberflus? I'm not entirely sure about that one. I would have to check. But let me tell you this. When I saw that it was just Shoddy and Parker up there, I was like, hell yeah. We're not going to have the unnecessary questions to Jerry Jones. And more importantly, the unnecessary 10-minute answers from Jerry. So that was exciting. I was like, hell yeah. But I need to go back and look at that Matt Eberflus introductory press conference, because TC915 is up to something there that I didn't really think about. Jerry not being up there was a win for the Cowboys today, if you ask me. Lupe says, I love how Parker is open to playing multiple schemes based on the player's strengths. The idea of placing them in position to succeed in their strength is great. Now, listen, man, I know a lot of people will hear that and they will be like, well, duh. Of course you want to be multiple. Of course you don't want to be predictable. Of course you want to coach to your players' strengths. But we just saw Matt Eberflus not do any of that for an entire freaking year. So I think it's relevant for us to hear this. It's relevant for Parker to be like, we're going to do a lot of stuff and I'm going to adapt to the players, right? It's not going to be the Marvin Overshown. What do you do great? I'm a great blitzer, sir. Well, how about you never blitz? Hey, Trevon, Savon, Theron, what do you like to do in terms of coverage? Well, you know what, coach? We are great press man cover corners. Well, how about you play zone and you do it 13 yards away from the line of scrimmage? That's what you got with Matt Eberflus, time and time again, right? So a lot of people, again, will say, of course, Parker is going to say that, but I'm telling you right now, he didn't do it. Like, Matt Eberflus was not doing this. So I think it's fair to get excited, is what I'm trying to say. Rolando here says, what's up from South Texas, Mo? The new defensive coordinator sounds good. Go Cowboys. I agree with you, man. I agree with you, Rolando. Thank you for joining the show, by the way. Taylor says, dude, he literally forgot to use a fresh linebacker in one game. Said he didn't realize the guy wasn't hurt. Do you remember that? The Logan Wilson situation was one of the worst parts of the Matt Eberflus 2025 season. Absolutely one of the worst. Because for those of you who don't know, my guy here, Taylor, is not making this up. Like, that happened. They were like, oh, Logan Wilson, why didn't we play him? We forgot about his existence. They pretty much said that. 10 Clegg says, can I have everything on your wall? Yeah, you can, man. Man, thank you. I appreciate you shouting out the background. I love it, personally. And one of my favorites has got to be Saul Canelo Alvarez. They're knocking out Billy Joe Sanders. And for those of you who are like, what does that have to do with the Cowboys? That fight actually took place at AT&T Stadium. That's not why it's up there, but it's my Cowboys justification for it being up there. Anyways, man. Cyberbob says, I love how Seattle used Witherspoon to blitz May, and I would expect the Cowboys to be more willing to do that kind of stuff. Shout out to Jesus Niebla. We've got a Lions fan in the chat. He's saying, Viva la México. Saludos a Jesus, que yo sé que ve en español. Shout out to him. Rolando says, Mo, many times, 4th and 1, the safety was 30 yards deep. Listen, man, I agree with all of you. But you know what? Let's keep the Christian Parker joy and forget about the Matt Eberflus suffering for today. The Cowboys got a good defense coordinator. If you didn't, I would recommend checking out the press conference. If you don't usually do that, I can tell you, it's worth it. You will hear a lot of insight from Parker specifically, and then also some from Schottenheimer too. I'm excited about this hire. I'm excited about the Cowboys' future on defense. I do think we got to be fair to Parker, and we got to remind everyone here, the Cowboys need a lot of players to make it work. So now let's see what the front office does to fill out that roster, right? Who are you bringing in free agency? Forget about who you draft in April. Those are obviously going to be important additions. But we'll know in March if this team is going to be different or not. We got to see what they do in terms of adding now, like, veterans who are ready to play now, who are ready to improve your defense now, not halfway through the season, not in 2027, which would probably be your first round picks, but now you need players in September who can go. So we'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, for now, that's all from my part. I appreciate you taking the time to talk some Cowboys football with me, and I'll see you next week and across the week over on A2Z Sports Dallas channels. We've got daily vertical videos coming out talking about the Cowboys, so I'm excited about all that. I will see you next week. Thank you, and bye-bye.